That was a good thing.
Yeah. You know what's not a good thing?
What?
I just dropped your drops.
Where?
I got them.
Huh. Well, thank God you did.
I'm glad they saw us today.
I know.
My God, Joe.
What?
What the horrible shit they got out of your left ear.
And I didn't even notice it because it don't work. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, but if you would have let me use that screw, it would have taken all that stuff out. So he doesn't know how hard I've been praying for your hearing, so that ear might be, the good Lord might be waking that ear up.
Maybe.
Yep.
Shift in strategy. Today is Monday, January 8th, and this is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. Ahead this hour, a former U.S. Capitol Police officer on why he's running for Congress.
There's a clear and present threat right now to our democracy, and I believe it's worth fighting for.
Also, we question a former U.S. Defense Secretary about the mystery of the current Defense Secretary not telling anyone he'd been hospitalized.
And the story behind the University of Michigan Wolverines and their iconic white buff sunglasses.
I feel like enough time has gone past that the connection between the Buffs and how they celebrate and how they operate is very authentic to Detroit.
First, the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Biden returned to South Carolina today, the state that famously helped him with the Democratic nomination in 2020. NPR's Asma Khalid reports this trip comes as Biden tries to boost his support among black voters ahead of his re-election bid.
Biden spoke at the historic Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston. In 2015, it was the site of a deadly hate crime where a white supremacist murdered 9 people.
The truth is under assault in America. As a consequence, so is our freedom, our democracy, our very country, because without the truth, there's no light.
This trip follows up on a theme of Biden's re-election bid that portrays extreme Republicans as a threat to democracy. The same mob, he says, that tried to steal an election is now trying to erase and steal history by banning books. Support from black voters was key to Biden's victory in 2020, but polling shows it has waned. Asma Khalid, NPR News.
Recent polls suggest that more black voters might consider supporting former President Donald Trump this year. Trump's rivals for the GOP nomination are scrambling to overcome the Republicans' overwhelming lead. The first real test comes Monday during Iowa's first in the nation caucuses. Two of the campaign's Clay Masters has been following are that of former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
There's a lot at stake for Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. They'll both be barnstorming the state. They'll appear at a CNN debate in Des Moines on Wednesday. Donald Trump will also be in Iowa that day, but for a separate Fox News town hall. Trump will also be tied up in courtrooms this week, so that'll keep him out of Iowa, every day. On Tuesday, he'll be in Washington, D.C. for a hearing on whether he has presidential immunity in the federal election subversion case. And then on Thursday, the judge in Trump's New York civil fraud trial will hear closing arguments.
Clay Masters, formerly of Iowa Public Radio, he's now with Minnesota Public Radio. The Federal Aviation Administration has approved procedures for airlines to inspect their grounded Boeing 737 MAX 9 jets. NPR's Joel Rose reports they were removed from service after part of one plane's fuselage blew out during an Alaska Airlines flight.
The FAA says airlines can begin inspections of about 170 planes that have been grounded after the incident on Friday night. The panel, known as a door plug, blew off of a Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft that had just taken off from Portland, Oregon, leaving a gaping hole in the plane. The door plug was later found in a backyard. The door plug is designed to fill an unused space for an extra emergency exit near the back of the aircraft. Investigators are trying to figure out why it became detached from the plane. The FAA says the jets will remain grounded until inspections are complete and any problems they turn up are fixed. Joel
That
Ross,
would have been a
NPR
weird
News,
thing to
Washington.
see in the backyard, even in Portland.
NPR News.
Yeah.
This is WFAE News. I'm Kenneth Lee. Much of North Carolina will be impacted by a strong weather system through Tuesday afternoon. Heavy rain and wind is expected to make its way to the Charlotte area late tonight. National Weather Service meteorologist Trisha Palmer says the mountains will see the heaviest rain.
So for the Charlotte metro area right now, we're expecting 2 to 3 inches for greater Charlotte. As you move a little bit further west into the western Piedmont, 3 to 4 inches. And then as you get into portions of the mountains, we could be seeing, some areas of the mountains could be seeing 4 to 6 inches.
Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Catawba, and Cabarrus County schools will be closed tomorrow due to the weather. Charlotte City Council's Economic Development Committee heard a dire report on the state of local office market today. Ned Curran, the former longtime leader of Ballantyne Corporate Park, said the citywide office vacancy rate of 25% is unprecedented, and it's worse than many submarkets.
North End, 48% vacancy. This is office products only. The University, almost 40%. South Park, 21%. Uptown, 21%. These are never before seen types of vacancies.
Work from home and hybrid work changes post-pandemic are behind the shift. A cluster of a dozen largely unoccupied buildings uptown are particularly concerning. The Charlotte Mecklenburg School Board will hold a public hearing tomorrow on a revised first aid policy that clears the way to stock naloxone in all schools. The nasal spray, also known as Narcan, reverses opioid overdoses and is considered a life-saving measure in the face of a national fentanyl crisis. CMS officials say school resource officers already carry Narcan at high schools, but the revised policy would clearly authorize the use of spray by CMS staff and school nurses, who are county employees. And this evening, you can expect mostly cloudy conditions and a low around 36 degrees. In the overnight hours, heavy rain is headed to the Charlotte metro area. Starting tomorrow at 7 a.m., a flood watch will be in effect. Right now, it's 49 in Charlotte. This is WFAE News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Procter & Gamble, maker of Metamucil, a fiber supplement containing psyllium, a plant-based fiber for trapping and removing waste in the digestive system, designed to be taken every day. More at metamucil.com.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Israel. It's the latest stop in a week-long tour of the Mideast aimed at trying to contain the war in Gaza. This is his fourth trip to Israel since early October, when Hamas attacked Israel, killing some 1,200 people. Secretary Blinken arrived in Tel Aviv shortly after an Israeli airstrike killed a senior Hezbollah commander in southern Lebanon. NPR International Affairs correspondent Jackie Northam is with us from Israel. Hi there.
Hi, Ari.
So Secretary Blinken has been on this multi-stop tour meeting with Turkish and Arab leaders. Can you give us a better sense of his agenda?
He has a full agenda. As you mentioned, one of the things he's trying to do is prevent the war in Gaza from spreading throughout the region, particularly between Israel and Iran-backed Hezbollah militia. You know, we're seeing increasingly deadly skirmishes and attacks between the two sides along Israel's northern border with Lebanon. But Blinken is also trying to ensure more humanitarian aid gets into Gaza. You know, there are severe shortages of food and water there. He's also urging regional players to get involved with shaping Gaza's future once the war is over. And finally, Ari, Blinken is expected to push Israeli leaders to scale back their offensive, this aerial bombardment of Gaza that's now entered into its fourth month.
Let's talk more about the situation with Israel and Lebanon, because as we mentioned, a Hezbollah commander was killed in an Israeli airstrike earlier today in Lebanon, less than a week after the assassination of a senior Hamas leader there. Many believe Israel was also behind that. So is there any indication that Israel will listen to what Blinken has to say?
Well, Israeli leaders have said they'll deliver a decisive military blow to Hezbollah if it doesn't agree to a deal to pull back its forces from the border. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, you know, he was visiting soldiers along the Lebanon border today, and he said, you know, the military would do everything to restore security in the area, and he added that it would be preferable if that could be done without what he called a wide-ranging campaign, but that it wouldn't stop Israel. Also, the U.S. and Israel appear to have different ideas about Gaza post-war. The White House would like to see some regional buy-in to support Gaza, once the fighting is over. And there are questions about who would be responsible for security and who would govern Gaza, and who would pay for reconstruction once the war is over.
The U.S. has been urging Israel to ease off its intensive bombing campaign of Gaza. Around 23,000 people have died there since the war began in October, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Does it look like Israel has started to change its strategy?
Well, last week the Israelis announced they were pulling back some troops from the north and would concentrate their efforts in the south of Gaza. And there's been talk for the past week or so that there is a shift in Israeli strategy, doing more targeted attacks. And this could be in response to repeated American calls, but it's still unclear what this new phase will really look like. The Israelis may be anticipating more difficult conversations with Secretary Blinken, and as the U.S. and its allies put pressure on Israel to scale down the fighting and allow more humanitarian aid into Gaza.
So who will Blinken meet with in Israel?
He'll have a round of meetings starting Tuesday with political leaders, and that includes Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He'll sit down with the war cabinet, and then he's going to have a one-on-one with Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant. On Wednesday, he's going to go out to the occupied West Bank to meet with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. And then there's just one last stop after that on this tour, and that's to Cairo to meet Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And Egypt is a critical player and negotiator, throughout this Gaza conflict.
It's NPR's Jackie Northman, Israel. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ari.
Tonight, the University of Michigan Wolverines face off against the University of Washington Huskies for the College Football National Championship. If you have been watching, you know the number one ranked Wolverines defense came up with a new way to celebrate turnovers early last season. The player who gets the takeaway wears Cartier sunglasses on the sidelines. Bryce Huffman in Michigan reports on why the celebration has special cultural significance in the Detroit area.
During a football game in 2022, former Michigan defensive back R.J. Moten made an interception. Then he headed to the sidelines. There, his teammates handed him a pair of Cartier sunglasses.
R.J. Moten with the cool shades on. Those are the buffs right there. Got the Cartiers.
For anyone who has spent time in Detroit, these sunglasses are known as buffs. For Michigan football, the sunglasses are a reward for getting a takeaway on defense. For black and brown Detroiters, though, they are so much more.
I bought my first pair of buffs when I was in the 7th grade.
This is Detroiter and rapper Shyvez Smith, better known by his stage name I Swear Vezzo.
White buffs, white work, white true.
By the time Smith began rapping in the mid-2000s, he says buffs were already a big deal for people in the city.
You immediately know whoever got...
I want to hear it. Aw.
Shirt Lizard, can I help you? Hello, this is Shirt Lizard. How can I help you?
Smith says buffs are in their own lane.
Growing up, when I used to put them buffs on, bro, I felt like Superman, like I transformed, like I'm a whole nother person.
Buffs have become synonymous with Detroit rappers and hustlers. They go for about $2,000 on average. Imani Mixon is an arts and culture writer from Detroit. She says high fashion items like buffs have helped people in the city look good and feel good for decades.
Visually, it's stunning to see Black people choose to display how they want to be seen through these glasses.
But they are expensive, and plenty of people have had their buffs stolen.
You also maybe shouldn't wear buffs if you can't defend yourself. I think that goes for any luxury item.
Buffs in Detroit's unique rap style didn't get popular outside the Motor City until the past few years. Jennifer Owenu hosts the YouTube show Ask Jen. The social media influencer often starts dialogue within the city's Black community. Owenu says at first she didn't like seeing non-Detroiters rock the city's style.
Because I felt like people really didn't know what was going on.
Now that the University of Michigan Wolverines started the turnover buffs trend, Owenu has softened her stance.
I feel like enough time has gone past that the connection between the Buffs and how they celebrate and how they operate is very authentic to Detroit.
After all, the Wolverines play just 45 minutes from Detroit. And now Buffs are a cultural staple with multiple generations.
Put the Buffs on my jacket, K. Cunningham. Put the Buffs on my jacket, K. Cunningham. Put the Buffs on my jacket, K. Cunningham.
Local rapper James Johnson, or Babytron, is just 23 years old, but even he wears Buffs and raps about them. Johnson says it wasn't enough for him to simply wear a pair that someone gave him.
No, I had to earn a pair. I wanted to make money. It was only like, what, $2,000? So I just wanted to make $2,000 to get some Buffs.
When he was 17, he bought his first pair.
I'm like 10 pairs in now, though.
Although he won't be at this year's national championship game, Johnson is happy that his favorite college team is embracing a piece of Detroit culture. For NPR News, I'm Bryce Huffman in Detroit.
Early this morning, NASA launched its first robotic mission to the moon's surface since the Apollo era.
5, 4, 3, we have ignition and liftoff.
But a few hours after launch, the mission appeared to be in trouble. NPR science correspondent Jeff Brumfield is here to talk about what happened. Hey, Jeff.
Hi, Ari.
First, what's the latest word on how the mission's going?
Yeah, it doesn't appear to be going well, unfortunately. This was a small probe called Peregrine 1 from a company called Astrobotic out of Pittsburgh. It launched just after 2 a.m. local time from Florida. The spacecraft went up, its power turned on, it made contact with Earth, everything looked good. Sometime after that, though, something went wrong with the propulsion system. It's not quite clear what it was, but the spacecraft has been losing propellant, according to updates from the company. It's also struggled with power issues, so those might be fixed for the moment. Anyway, power and fuel are the two things you need to fly in space, so this looks like a pretty big problem.
Oh, well, what was Peregrine 1 supposed to have been doing?
Well, I mean, had it worked, this would have been the first American spacecraft to make a soft landing on the moon since the Apollo missions. It was carrying several small NASA experiments and instruments, as well as payloads from the Mexican Space Agency and some private companies. Now, the bigger picture here is NASA wants to send astronauts back to the moon, but it's trying to do it as cheaply as possible. Part of that is subcontracting the smaller jobs to the private sector. Astrobotic is one of several companies that might one day be used by NASA to send supplies and equipment to its astronauts. So basically, think of this as like a trial of lunar FedEx.
It's only less reliable, it sounds like. And this is not the only mission to the moon that's gone poorly lately. Why is it so hard to do something that the U.S. first did decades ago?
Yeah, that's right. A Russian mission crashed on the moon last year. So did a commercial mission from Japan. You know, before all this happened, I spoke to John Thornton, the CEO of Astrobotic, and he told me when you're dealing with a satellite, that just goes around the Earth. If something goes wrong, you can fix it the next time it goes by. But a lunar mission has to travel from Earth to the moon and then land. These kinds of missions are constantly adjusting and have far less room for error.
Going down to the surface of the moon, you have minutes or seconds, which is not really a practical time window to solve anything. So it's got to work.
And this mission did not work. So what does that say more broadly about NASA's plan to rely on commercial companies to get it to the moon? Is that strategy going to get it into trouble?
You know, this isn't the only mission. In fact, this was a relatively small mission. You might even call it one small step. There's other ones coming from a company called Intuitive Machines next month and more. But you're right. The bottom line is the commercial strategy is cheap, but it carries more risk. And, you know, that could make NASA's lunar ambitions very difficult, especially on a tight budget. We'll just have to see.
One small step, one small stumble, perhaps. NPR's Jeff Brumfield, thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
More All Things Considered is ahead on 90.7 WFAE and WFAE.org. I'm Nick Della Canal. Good afternoon. Just ahead, why did it take the Pentagon 3.5 days to tell the White House that Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin was hospitalized?
Because Biden didn't answer the phone.
Up next. And then later this hour, Former U.S. Capitol Police officer Harry Dunn fought with rioters on January 6th and remains worried about the threats facing our country.
I don't think that it's an exaggeration to say that we're one election away from, the extinction of democracy as we know it.
Dunn talks about he's now running for Congress. That's in 15 minutes on WFAE. It's 48 degrees in Charlotte at the moment under mostly cloudy skies. Looks like a storm could be rolling in tonight with some windy conditions. That appears likely to extend through tomorrow. The Weather Service has issued a flood watch for tomorrow in the Charlotte area with more wind gusts expected up to 44 miles an hour.
Whoa.
Tomorrow, high around 65. So be on the lookout for that. Support comes from WFAE listeners and Johnson & Wales University. From computer science and psychology to multiple MBAs, JWU brings the university's hands-on learning approach online. More information at jwu.edu.
Peter Sagal here from Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. If you're a member of this NPR station, thank you. It means a lot. Now, if you were looking for another way to help the station...
All those people do is ask for money.
Yep.
They're liberal as shit. Let the fucking, like you call them, baby killers and
Yep.
communists give them money. All right,
Yep.
I'm gonna leave you here.
Okay.
I'll be right there by the back window. I'm gonna put some stuff in the trunk and then we're going up front.
Okay.
All right.